Jahan, if you could describe the contribution made by soldiers of the British Indian Army in both World Wars.
Okay, so in the First World War, there's 1.3 to 1.5 million who fought for Britain. In the Second World War, there's 2.5 million, and they fought across major conflict zones. So in the First World War, the Western Front, where British troops were taking a hammering, they came in to plug those defensive lines at a very important time. They also fought in the Middle East. The largest section of the Middle East would have been Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq. I think 13 out of the 17 British divisions that fought in the Middle East were Indian. And Mesopotamia became the largest graveyard for Indian soldiers. They also fought in the East African campaign. So these were the three major fronts that Indians were involved in. In the Second World War, they actually made it to Dunkirk, believe it or not. So there was a number of companies fighting in Dunkirk. And if I'm correct, that was Britain's first major encounter against Nazi Germany. They played a role there. They then played a massive role in helping Britain win its first major land victory against Nazi Germany in North Africa, which literally sets the precedent for what's to come afterwards. And that is a major war against the Germans with the American allies on our side, and then routing the Germans across Europe. They played a huge role in the Far East. They formed the largest army of the Second World War, the 14th Army. You know, they've got absolutely smashed in Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaya. They make a stand in Burma. They're pushed all the way back into India. They're fighting for their lives now. Huge casualties, longest retreat in British military history. Then they come and fight in Italy against some of Hitler's elite units, Fallschirmjägers, and some of these boys are as young as 14 years old. So there's epic stories of bravery, camaraderie, British soldiers fighting alongside them, young men who've left their families behind, not sure they'll ever see them again. So it's absolutely mind-boggling, the kind of experiences these boys are having.
Vital and massive contribution there. You mentioned you had young lads as young as 14 years old. Yeah. I mean, there are just so many amazing, powerful stories of bravery. And I was just wondering if you could share a few, some that got the highest military honors.
And there's a Muslim guy called Ali Haider. So you've got this very short guy, and he's a Pashtun. So he's from the northwest frontier region of India, which is now what we call is Bhutan land, now part of Pakistan, right? And he swims across, takes out 2 German machine gun teams, is injured, literally throws himself into the second pit, forces a surrender of this German team. And he goes on to win Britain's highest medal for bravery as well. And then in the Far East, where there's just a horrible battle going on against the Imperial Japanese army, you've got someone like Nand Singh, who literally is facing machine gun fire, and but then he's literally charging trenches one after the other on a bayonet charge. I mean, you know, sometimes people say to me that these people did it for money. No amount of money brings out that level of courage or bravery. So it was a lot more than money, I'm afraid. And it was, once again, it was the loyalty to the regiment.
And Jahan, I mean, these men and these women, they're often called, you know, the forgotten soldiers, our forgotten heroes. And it has been overlooked for so long. What spurred you to find out your own family's military history? And why do you think it has been overlooked for so long?
That's a really good question. So I was into history as a young boy, but I was told that I should be a doctor like every other South Asian. But I later came to it. So I'd already done it. By that time, I'd done a history degree, and I was running a youth program. So I recall engaging with a lot of young kids and trying to keep them away from just criminal gangs. That was one of the objectives. And it was a Home Office funded program. It was actually quite successful. And I recall seeing this one kid, and they were kind of like, you know, just laughing over a contractor who died in Iraq. It was quite a brutal death this guy went through. And I just couldn't understand it. And I recall asking them, what do you find so funny in the death of an innocent man? If you're upset about the death of innocent Iraqis, why do you not have any empathy? And the response gave me an existential crisis. He just says that, do you really think we're British? The way that we get treated, we're foreigners, we're brown, we're South Asians, we're Pakistanis, we're Muslim. Where does that feature on the like list in Britain? And he goes, there's nothing that connects us. It really, I have to be honest, it really broke me. I couldn't give him an answer at that moment, because having gone through racism in the 70s and often told to go back home and that our grandfathers had done nothing for Britain, I was left speechless. And I went away and I had a word with an old supervisor of mine at the University of Birmingham. And he says, look, Commonwealth War Graves Commission is a good place to start. What do you want to focus on? I says, just South Asian soldiers and the connection to Britain. So maybe if I look at something closer to home, those who fought Nazi Germany. As I went through the records, just like numerous numbers of Sikhs, Muslims, Hindus, Gurkhas, Christian Indians even. And then all of a sudden I fell upon ages 15, 16, 17. As I went through the names in the areas, I finally went back to him and I relayed the story. And he was so fascinated that he then went to his mom, discussed the story. He found out that one of his elders had fought in Burma. It completely changed the script for him. When I came back with boys that were his age that had fought, I says, does that make you feel any more connected? Because I wish I'd known this before. And that completely changed his trajectory to being someone who felt he was hated upon, and that he looked upon Britain's enemy as his friend, to going to the point where he was coming out with me, trying to challenge some of these misconceptions. And the turnaround that I saw in him made me feel like, I think that we could carry this story out to a wider youth base. So I then started to go out to schools, and I literally became a historian for the youth in particular, and was able to then hear stories from teachers after I'd left. They said, so many kids have taken up history after you did your session. And these kids were Asian kids. And they says, up until that point, they had no interest in history at all. You familiarized them to an aspect of their history that was unknown. So I literally became this historian for the youth. And that was just, for me, it was like all worth doing this in the end, because I know I had a family member who fought, but I wasn't interested in his story that much. I mean, where did he fight? Burma? Oh, I don't know much about Burma. Wasn't interested in his age so much. But this kid really got me going. In the end, I went back and interviewed my family, as in the cousins who were the children of that uncle of mine. So this is my father's older brother. And it turns out he was 16 years old when he left. So you couldn't make the story up. And that's really what piqued my interest. And then ever since then, I've never looked back and I've never stopped researching.
That's amazing. What a story. That is remarkable. And that's that. I think so many people can identify with your story and obviously learn so much about themselves from what you teach, which is amazing. It's like, what difference do you think it will make if more people actually knew about their historical ancestors and what their families went through?
If more was known about the contribution of so many South Asian soldiers, it would help to instill a sense of confidence, improve a sense of belonging, cement the social bonds of different communities in British society, and turn the idea of a shared heritage into a meaningful weapon against prejudice. That's the best way of encapsulating it, because I have taken this out to even white majority areas,
What's the response that you get?
Unbelievable. Absolutely phenomenal. Like these, some of them young men as well, older men too, women included. They've got this misconception that it was just white, British and American from Hollywood. I mean, even the South Asians don't know their full history, let alone anyone else. Like those families that I talk to know about a little bit about their grandfather, let's say. But beyond that, they don't know the scale of the contribution. And then also when you're telling white communities about this, for some of them, it just completely rocks their world. Why haven't we been told? I've had men almost cry. I remember going to one event in Nottingham. The response was unbelievable. They stood up, shook my hand. We're so sorry, we just didn't know this. We don't know what to say to you. That up until now, we've got this total misconception South Asians are just economic migrants here pinching the pennies. And now we're hearing that they gave their lives for us. They fought for us when they didn't have to fight for us. They fought for our independence when we denied them their independence. And when you hear things like that, you just think, wow, this really is a fantastic recipe to bring people together. You know, they say a small city can bring so many communities together. Well, in this case, these stories were bringing people together that from different elements and different parts of British society. And I'd never thought this was possible until I actually saw it with my own eyes.
Remarkable. And it's that unity which is so important. And I did a social media video once explaining the South Asian contribution in both world wars, and I still remember the comments that I got underneath that video. So many thank you messages.